All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and we're going to review factoring, okay? Now, before you factor anything, always remember to factor out the GCF. That is always going to be the first thing. That stands for greatest common factor. Always factor out the greatest common factor before doing anything. So for example, 1. We are going to factor 3x to the 4th power minus 9x cubed. If you notice, this is one term and this is another term. They both have a 3 in it and they have 3 x's in it. So you are going to factor out the 3x cubed. That right there is the GCF of the binomial. Now, if you take 3 out of here and x cubed out of here, you're only left with x minus. And if I factor out a 3 out of here, I'm left with 3 left. And then I took the x cubed out. Now let's check our answer. To check your answer, you would just distribute. So 3x cubed times x is 3x to the 4th. And then 3x cubed times negative 3x gives you negative 9x cubed. Now, let's say another way you could have done it. If you don't know what's left over, how do you find the GCF? You're going to write 3x to the 4th. That is the same as saying 3 times x times x times x times x. Now I'm going to write 9x to the 3rd. Break down the number into the prime numbers. So 9 breaks down into 3 times 3. And then x is x times x times x. Now look and see what parts do they share. They both share a 3. They both share an x. They both share another x. And they both share another x. This right here is your GCF. So my GCF there is going to be a 3x cubed. So now when you take the 3x cubed out, 3x to the 4th was the first term. What's left over is just the x minus, right here, the only thing left over is a 3. Same answer. Let me do another basic one. So many of you guys can just tell, oh, they both have a 2 and they both have at least 3 x's. So I'm going to factor out a 2x to the 3rd. Another way you can do it is divide each of these by 2x to the 3rd. Because when you factor it out, that's basically what you're doing. 2 divided by 2 cancels. X to the 5th divided by x to the 3rd is x squared. The symbol in the middle is a plus. 8 divided by 2 is a 4, and then the x cubes cancel. Now, this is not a difference of squares because it has a plus in the middle. Difference of squares has to have a minus in the middle. All right. Now, always factor out the GCF. Not all problems have a GCF, though. Let's say we had 4x squared plus 16x plus 12. Right here, I do have a GCF. 4 goes into all of these terms. So I'm going to factor out a 4. If I factor out a 4 here, I'm left with an x squared plus. If I factor out a 4 here, I'm left with a 4x plus. If I factor out a 4 here, I'm left with the number 3. Go ahead and distribute. 4 times x squared is 4x squared. 4 times 4x is 16. 4 times 3 is 12. So I did do it correctly. We are now going to go on and factor that piece. Right here, we were done because we had a binomial. We couldn't factor it anymore, and that was not a difference of squares. Here, I can still factor. 4 is going to be on the outside. Now, the first term in my binomials has to give me an x squared. Well, the only way to get an x squared is by x times x. Now, the only way to get a positive 3 is when you're multiplying the two outside is a 3 and a 1. Now, because they're all positive, I know it has to be positive. Now, let's see. 3x, 3 times x is 3x. X times 1 is x. And 3x plus x gives me the 4x. And the first two x times x is an x squared. And the last two, 3 times 1 is 3. So I am done right here. I am done. Let's try another one. Let's say we had a 2x squared plus 2x minus 40. Well, they all have a 2 in it, so 2 is going to be my GCF. If I factor out a 2, I'm left with x squared. If I factor out a 2, I'm left with the x. And if I factor out a 2 here, I'm left with the 20. I'm now going to factor this piece out. Don't lose the 2. The 2 is out in the front. X squared has to give me an x and an x. Now, because this is a negative number, one has to be positive, one has to be negative, because the 2 at the end is going to give you the last number. Now, 20. The numbers of 20, I'm going to write out the multiples. It's 1 and 20, 2 and 10, and 4 and 5. Now, I have to look at these three factors and see when I add them up, which one will give me a 1x. The only one that will do that is this one, the 4 and the 5. Because remember, when you multiply the inner and the outer, that is going to be the middle term. Now I'm looking, I want it to add up and give me a positive number. So I want the bigger number to be positive. So 5 is going to be positive, 4 is going to be the negative. So let's see, 5 times x is a 5x. X times negative 4 is a negative 4x. 5x minus 4x gives me the negative 1x. And once again, x times x is the x squared. 5 times negative 4 is the negative 20. And if it doesn't work, then just switch the numbers. You can do guess and check. Let's say I had x cubed minus 2x squared minus 35x. Your GCF does not always have to be a number. I notice that all of these have an x. So I'm going to factor out the x. So now I'm left with x squared minus, I took out one of the x's, so I'm left with 2x. I took out the x, I'm left with a 35. I'm now going to factor just that piece. Do not lose the x. It's still on the outside. The only way to get x squared is by an x and an x. Now I'm going to write out the multiples of 35. Well, that's only 1 and 35 and 7 and 5. But which ones, when I add it up, can give me a possible negative 2? It's only this one. Now, because it's a negative, I know one has to be positive, one has to be negative. Because a positive times a negative gives me a negative. Now, let's say I just put the 7 here and the 5 here. If I did that, this is going to give me a 7x. This is going to give me a negative 5x. Does that give me negative 2x? No, it doesn't. So I'm going to switch the numbers around. I'm going to put the 5 on this side now, and I'm going to put the 7 on this side. So now, when I multiply the inner ones, that's going to give me a 5x. And when I multiply the outer ones, that's a negative 7x, which that does give me the negative 2x. And then once again, x times x is x squared. And then right here, positive 5 times negative 7 gives me negative 35. What if I had 3x squared minus 75? Always, whenever you have two terms, be aware of difference of squares. That's not a square, that's not a square. However, I do have a GCF of 3. So 3 goes into both of these. If I take the 3 out, I'm left with x squared. If I take the 3 out of here, I'm left with a 25. This is a difference of squares. That's a square minus in the middle. This is x squared, that is 5 squared, minus in the middle. Do not lose the 3 is out in the front. Difference of squares. The first square is going to be the first term. The last square is going to be the last square. 1 plus, 1 minus. Last one. We have 4x squared minus 36. The GCF here is going to be a 4. So then I'm left with x squared minus 9. This is a difference of squares. That is going to be x plus 3, x minus 3. Now keep in mind, not all of these problems will have a GCF. You can just take the factor from directly. All right, thanks guys.